Hey guys, I'm Rich from NeoWin. Today we're unboxing the Honor View 20. So, it's weird. I went to a Chinese restaurant earlier this week and I got a fortune. It says, you will be awarded some great honor. And then sure enough, on my doorstep, just a couple days later, it's the Honor View 20. No joke. It's funny because at the event, it was a little unclear if review units will be coming through for these because this phone is not sold in the United States. And if you've ever reviewed phones, you know that sometimes it's a little trouble to get phones that aren't coming to the region where you're located. So I'm really excited that I was able to get my hands on this because it's a pretty cool device. This other phone that you see in front of me, this is the Honor View 10. And obviously this was last year's model. So you can see something about the design on this. Aluminum unibody, kind of a basic design. And that was Huawei's design language last year. And this year it seems like they're going nuts with design, and I love it because this thing is so cool. So let's just open this up. They sent me the blue one. Okay, and look at that. Okay, it's made of glass, obviously, and it has these arrows that just reflect, and it's lovely. It comes in red, which is also lovely. There's a black model that has kind of rainbow colored arrows, and just look at the difference in design between these two phones. It's incredible, and I love what they're doing. So Honor is a sub-brand of Huawei, and I don't quite get it, why this stuff exists, but it's Huawei's a Chinese brand, and they don't do a lot of stuff in the U.S. in terms of phones, so which is really disappointing because they make awesome hardware, and I feel like it's a disservice to the United States consumers that we can't go into a carrier store and buy this stuff today because it's wonderful hardware. But so the big deal with the Honor View 20 was the Kirin 970 processor, the AI camera, and, well, that was a big deal with the Kirin 970 because the Mate 10 and the P20 use this processor and they use this technology. And then this was the Honor phone, the Honor flagship phone that did the same thing. Of course, it did it at a lower price point, too, because this is more of like a lifestyle brand, and these phones tend to be a little bit more inexpensive. So, again, lovely device. So one thing that you're lacking, though, versus the Huawei equivalent, and I say Huawei equivalent because these are different phones, but there are very similar aspects about them. So one thing you're not getting is the Leica Lens, or Leica certified lens. So if you look at the Mate 20 Pro, which I actually have right here, this has a 40 megapixel lens, a 20 megapixel wide angle lens, an 8 megapixel telephoto lens. This has a dual lens, although 48 megapixels, so that's going to be really cool to test out. So the thing about 48 megapixels is that the idea, I'm just holding it this way so you can just keep looking at this beautiful phone. So the idea behind a high resolution lens, okay, because a lot of people don't really understand it. They just assume higher resolution means more detail, which isn't really true. So like if you look at a 4K display, you have 8.3 megapixels that you're looking at on that display. If you look at a 1080p display, it's just 2.1 megapixels. Okay, so really, any camera you're using has a higher resolution than the display that you're looking at it on. So there's, something called super sampling where, I'm not really going to get into that, but I want to talk about Lossless Zoom, which is probably my favorite feature of smartphone cameras. So it's been tried in a variety of different ways, and it's been tried in 2 different ways on this phone. So a smartphone camera can only see so much, right? Think of it like your eyeball, right? You see what you see. And what digital zoom does is that if you crop it to see half as much, you lose half the quality. So if you lose half the quality of 48 megapixels, you still have a 24 megapixel photo. So you can zoom in quite a bit without really losing quality. Whereas if you have, say, a 12 megapixel lens and you lose half the quality, you're down to 6 megapixels. And the more you zoom, it just degrades more rapidly. So what Huawei did with the Mate 20 Pro, it made sort of a hybrid solution where you have that 40 megapixel lens, you have an 8 megapixel telephoto lens is what they call it. This is the other option that a lot of manufacturers went with for lossless zoom, which is a second lens, which is a second lens that has the same resolution, but it can see half as much. So that's the idea behind the telephoto lens. And honestly, it's a good idea in concept, but then you have a smaller lens, and so a lot of times the low light photography isn't as good on those lenses. Honestly, I'm just really pumped to see a 48 megapixel lens. So another thing about this device, and let's see if we can boot it up. Okay, so it is an all black boot screen. I was hoping it would be all white so you could see the notch, or hole punch, as we might call it. So this is going to be the 2019 trend in smartphones. There we go. So we just have instead of a notch, we have a corner hole punch. All right, so this device is restoring, so I can tell you all about my resentment against these hole punches, which no one asked for. And notches are something that no one asked for. So this is an issue that I really have. So remember the LG V20 and the V10? Those were really the first notch phones. Now some people are going to say, oh, it was a second display. Whatever you want to call it, if it was a separate panel, it doesn't matter. It had a notch. It was in the corner. And then at some point, everybody decided to copy Apple. And I know Essential was the first one to put a notch in the middle, but Apple was the one they were copying. So at some point, everybody decided to copy Apple and put a notch right smack in the middle of the phone. So now we had these two kind of corner display panels, which never made sense. LG even still called that section the second screen. So it would have made a lot more sense to move the notch to the corner so you'd have all this area to be able to do stuff with. And then no one did that. So now we have this hole punch display, and they're finally putting it in the corner. And it's like you could have just put the notch there to begin with. But whatever. Moving on. Okay, so I finally got this thing set up. Huawei's setup is always a little frustrating because it has two different setups inside the same setup, and it's because it has Google setup running and it has Huawei setup running, and sometimes it asks the same thing, and it's gotten a lot better. So I mean, it is what it is. So now we finally got it up and running. So this guy has a 6.4 inch 1080p LCD. So the display is pretty nice. I don't think that anybody can reasonably tell the difference between 1080p and 1440p. I've seen people say like, oh, you need 1440p, and then say, but I love the P20 Pro. And then someone goes, well, the P20 Pro was 1080p, and they had no idea, because honestly, it is really super hard to tell the difference at this screen size. So 6.4 inches, but it has a 19.25 by 9 aspect ratio. So yeah, there's that. It's kind of a weird aspect ratio, actually. So yeah, it's a very tall device. Remember, 6.4 inches doesn't mean what it used to back when 16 by 9. When it was 16 by 9, it was wider. So these things are measured diagonally. So you don't get as much surface area as you would have on a 6.4 inch 16 by 9 display. Okay, so other than that, it's pretty much EMUI, which is Huawei's skin. Looks a little bit like iOS in many areas. There's no app drawer, though you can turn it on in settings. It does that weird reflective thing on your apps, which I'm not a huge fan of. Yeah, and it's got a bunch of Huawei apps. It doesn't have the mirror app, which I always thought was hilarious, because there's a lot of apps on here that a lot of people don't need for any legitimate reason, and they seem to have cut down. So there was an app called Mirror, which would actually just use the front-facing camera, and you'd be able to look at yourself. That was it. You could put frames around yourself. You couldn't even take a picture with it, when I think most people would just use the front camera. We have the Honor app, which I believe just takes you to the Honor store. Yeah, I don't really want to get into that right now. I'm not really interested. Yeah, so that is the Honor View 20. We have somewhat new camera app. So this is the Huawei camera app. You can see it goes to a 2x zoom. So it's not doing the exact same thing that the Mate 20 would do, which Mate 20 Pro would do, which would be switched to 3x, because it doesn't have a 3x lens on it. So what we're going to be able to do, though, we're going to be able to, so you can set the resolution here. Okay, so I don't know the difference between 48 megapixels and 48 megapixels ultra clarity, so I'm going to look into that. So what happens is, though, if you go to this, you don't have that toggle for zoom anymore because all you're getting is max resolution. So it won't even let you pinch to zoom. And the other phones are like that too. I kind of wish it wasn't. I actually wish you can adjust resolution. Like if I cut it to half, I wish I could just take a 24 megapixel photo. But you know, they haven't pulled that off just yet. This does have a Kirin 980 processor, which is like the second generation. It has a second generation neural processing unit. So we will see the predictive stuff that we get. I don't want high vision right now. AI camera right there. Yeah, they did move this stuff around. Like I said, it's a new camera app. So what we're getting is new options, which is kind of weird. So if we go into video settings, we'll see we have 1080p. We can go up to 1080p 60 frames per second or 4K 30 frames per second, which is kind of a bummer. I do like seeing 4K 60 frames per second options on modern smartphones. I don't like having to choose between high resolution and high frame rate. You know, we shouldn't have to. And the chipset should really be powerful enough to do it. Okay, so let's just get a. This has got some fingerprints on it by now, but you could just see the reflections of this beautiful device. And I gotta say, and we'll just pull out the Mate 20 Pro just to look at, you know, some of the beautiful designs that Huawei's been coming up with. They've been doing a really great job in this area. And by the way, this isn't the only beautiful Honor device. Take a look at what they've done throughout 2018. It's stunning. The only thing is, I'll probably get a clear case for this because you notice I have a clear case for the Mate 20 Pro. And the reason for that is because, honestly, it just picks up fingerprints and it stops looking so beautiful so often. Oh, and before I forget, let's take a look at what else is in the box. All right, we have a SIM card pin, which is pretty standard, I guess. It does have a clear case. All right, that's a pretty nice clear case too. So maybe I'll use that, keep it from getting fingerprints on the device. USB Type A to Type C cable. I assume it comes wrapped up in a little plastic when the consumer buys it. And then we have a European charger, sadly. Unfortunately, there is no wireless charging with this device. That's kind of a bummer. I do love I love the unique designs that Huawei's doing. What I don't like is glass backs for the sake of glass backs, because you're making it prettier, but it's also more fragile. You can't shatter the back on this aluminum phone. So the benefit that you get from switching to a glass back, there's two benefits really. One is wireless charging, because you can't do wireless charging through aluminum like this. The other benefit is that it's prettier, but that's not a functional benefit. So if you don't do wireless charging, you're just making the phone more fragile, just to make it prettier. So again, it's beautiful. I love it. I can't say I don't love it. Huawei did finally add wireless charging in the Mate 20 Pro, and it also has a feature called reverse wireless charging. So you can actually put a phone on top of this and charge that phone. So it's pretty cool, and I wish they included it in this. So yeah, the other thing about this phone, not going to be sold in the United States. I don't want to get into the concerns, you know, about the U.S. government and China and all that stuff, because, and I don't want to get into whether I believe it or not, because I don't know. But yeah, the point is it's not going to be sold in the United States, and I think that's a huge disservice to the U.S. customers. It will work if you put a SIM card in there. I mean, I use them and I love them. And you know, and I wish they were more widely available here, and I could tell my friends, go out and buy this thing, you know, because they're wonderful devices, and I can't wait to spend the next few weeks with this as my main phone. And yeah, I'm gonna be testing out the camera a lot, and seeing what I think of this hole punch display. I'm not sold on it just yet. So yeah, we'll have more in a few weeks. I'm Rich from NeoWin. Have a great night.